Welcome back, everybody, to another Japanese with Josh episode. This is episode 5, I believe. And in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about ta, chi, tsu, te, to, along with what those sounds sound like with the ten mark. Remember the two little accent marks that change the sound of some hiragana? We're also going to dive into directional phrases in Japanese. So, as I may have mentioned in the past, I'm focusing on making phrases and teaching you vocabulary and teaching you Japanese that you will actually use in Japan. So, along with, grammar principles and more advanced stuff in the future. Right now, I'm just focusing on Japanese that will help you right now if you decide to go visit Japan or go move to Japan for the very first time. So today's video, I'm going to teach you how to give directions, how to understand directions for certain places, and give you some vocabulary that will help out with trying to find where things are. So you can ask a Japanese person, hey, where is this thing? And they can direct you in the correct direction, and you'll be able to know what they are saying, to an extent at least. So we're going to start off with the hiragana. Today we are doing tachi, tsu, te, to, and this is what they look like. Let's head over to the tablet real quick. So we have ta, chi, tsu, te, to. Just like with the last lesson, this E sound right here is not a T, like a T-I, it's chi. So just like with sa, shi, this was a S-H-I sound and not an S-I sound. Chi is the same exact way. It's not a T-I sound, it's a chi sound. So keep that in mind. Ta, chi, tsu, te, to. Now this tsu sound right here is also different. We have chi then tsu. So logically, based on the other hiragana that we've learned, it would seem like it should be ta, ti, tu, te, to. But it's actually ta, chi, tsu, te, to. So this tsu sound right here is very specifically tsu, not tu. So it's tsu like in tsunami. So if you've heard the tsunami before, it's that exact same sound, tsu, T-S-U. Now this tsu sound is also used for another thing in hiragana, in writing in hiragana and katakana actually. So some words in Japanese have a pause in between some of the sounds. So the word yappari, right? Notice I didn't say yappari, I said yappari, like a little quick pause in between the ya and the pa sound. So yappari. When you see double consonant sounds or double consonant romaji in Japanese, this is signifying that there's a pause, right? Yappari. In between those sounds, we have a very small tsu. So it's actually spelled yatsupari, but the tsu sound is very small. And when we write tsu really small in between other characters, that indicates that there is a pause there. And we wouldn't actually pronounce the sound tsu, but we just pause when we hit it. So we don't say yatsupari, we say yappari. I'm going to dive a little bit more into that later on when we have vocabulary that have a chisai tsu or a small tsu. For now, just keep in mind that the tsu symbol is not always pronounced if it's smaller. If it's smaller, it's just silent and it makes a pause sound in the word. So we're going to start off with the ta sound. So ta, this is what ta looks like, and here are the pieces that make ta a hiragana symbol. So first we have a horizontal line. Then we have the top part of ko. So if you remember the kanji ko looks like this, we have that top part just without that little angle right there. So looks really similar to ko. If we were to write ko just like this, it's pretty much that symbol right next to that T shape right there. So then we add the bottom part of the ko hiragana to make this all together ta. So all the pieces that make this hiragana look like that. We've got the horizontal line, the vertical line, the top parenthesis shape, the bottom parenthesis shape, or the ko shape, however you want to call that. Now I'm going to show you how I personally would handwrite this. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that with a lot of hiragana symbols, people kind of handwrite it a little differently than it's technically supposed to be written. So I'm going to show you two different ways people will write this. One is just going to look pretty much like what I just showed you, and the other one's going to look a little different. So kind of just pay attention to what this looks like. So I write really quickly a lot of the times, and I won't take the time to actually take my pen off of the paper like you should when you write this right here, as a lot of people do in Japanese. Sometimes my pen kind of stays on the paper like really lightly when I move from piece to piece. So when I'm writing quickly, it might look something more like this right here. So as you can see, what happened here was I made the T shape, and then when I went to go make the ko shape, or the, the sideways parenthesis shape, I didn't lift my pen off the paper when I made both of those shapes right there. So instead of making it like this, I kind of made it like that. Now, you see this with tash symbols every now and then. I write it like that a lot just because I write really quickly. Like I mentioned, that second part of ta kind of looks like ko, that it kind of looks like this symbol right here. So when you write ko, it's almost always disconnected. Like you have space between these two pieces right here. You would never really write ko like a Z shape like that, like I do with the second part of ta. So although ta Some people do write it like this, where it's kind of connected when they're writing quickly. Kol probably should not be written that way. It kind of looks more like te by itself than it does kol. So yeah, just make sure that the kol symbols are actually disconnected. Next we have chi, and what you might notice about this is that it looks a whole lot like sa or ki. And these are all similar symbols, but they are separate symbols. So I think people get tripped up on these when they first learn hiragana. Just keep in mind these are all 3 different symbols and they are pronounced different ways. So chi is just an inverted sa, and it looks a lot like ki, but it doesn't have that second little line right there. So you will probably be confused by this from time to time. Just keep in mind, you know, the more you write it, the more repetitive you are with it, the more likely you are to remember which one is sa, which one is ki, and which one is chi. One way you can remember that ki is ki, it kind of looks like a key a little bit, so you could probably draw something like this and then imagine this being an actual key that opens a door or something like that, you know. I mean, this is a really terrible drawing, but maybe that can help you remember that this is a ki when it has 2 lines through there and not a chi. Unfortunately, I don't have the same version of that for like sa or chi. I didn't really think about it before I wrote out this lesson, and I'm not going to stop the lesson to go find one. So just repetition is going to help you memorize which one's which. Let's look at how we write chi. So we have a line going across, and this is going in the same direction as sa and ki. So chi, although it is written backwards from sa right here, so this being sa, this being chi, the line right here you'll notice is at the exact same angle. We don't change the angle like that and write it that way. It's still in the same angle as sa and ki. Secondly, we have that second part right there. Again, that's just an inverted version of sa, and these are what the 2 pieces of this hiragana look like. Here's how I would handwrite this symbol right here. So again, just like sa and ki, I'm gonna go kind of at an angle from left to right, down to up, and then I'm gonna come down and I'm going to just go around, just make that opposite sa shape, just invert that sa shape and make it chi. Now, unlike sa and ki, you don't separate this shape at all when it comes to chi. So if we're talking about sa, you know, you can make it like this. If we're talking about ki, you can make it like this and not connect these 2 pieces right here. With chi, you cannot do that. You can't write chi as this. That's not chi. This is chi, that is not. So chi should always be connected, and you should always write it connected. One way that might help you remember which one is chi, ki, and sa is to know that ki has 2 lines. Maybe write sa disconnected and then write chi connected, because it's supposed to be connected. So that would be 3 different ways that you write those symbols so that they're just that much different to maybe help you differentiate between the 3. Moving on to tsu. Now I think pronouncing this is actually going to be a little bit harder than drawing it, because drawing it is just one motion. As you can see right here, it looks pretty simple. So tsu is written just like this. It's one piece, it goes from left to right. I will show you how I draw this one right here. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time talking about how to draw this, because this is really simple and it's only 1 stroke. So when we write tsu, we go from left to right and make a little oval shape. It's almost like a backwards C that's like a little bit too long. So tsu, that's how we write that. It's from left to right and then back around, just like that. Tsu, tsu, tsu. Now I mentioned before that when you write tsu smaller than the other characters in a hiragana line, that means that there's a pause between the character it comes after and the character it comes before. Let me give you a couple examples of that, so that way I'm not leaving you short without any idea of what I'm talking about when it comes to the chisai tsu, or the small tsu. So example 1 would be the word kekko, which means to be okay. To be okay, or like fine. If somebody offers you something that you don't want, you could say kekko desu, which means I'm fine, don't worry about it, no thank you. So as you can see, there's a little tsu in this right here, but I did not pronounce it. I did not pronounce it as ketsukou, because the tsu is smaller than the other symbols. Now right here, this tsu is the same size as everything else, so this would actually be pronounced ketsukou. This, because the tsu is smaller, is pronounced kekko. So when we pronounce this right here, we know this is ke, we know this is ko, and we know this is u. And this symbol right here is just going to be a stop. So when we spell this in Romaji, we don't actually spell this K-E-K-O-U. We actually spell this K-E-K-K-O-U. Kekkou. Anytime we see a double consonant in Japanese, we know that there is a chisai tsu between the first sound and the second sound. So the first sound being ke, the second sound being ko. This little k right here, this extra consonant right here, is just letting us know that it's kekkou. Kekkou, not kekkou. Kekkou. Little pause right there. Another word with a small tsu in Japanese is gakkou. Gakkou, which means school. So if you notice right here, we have a small tsu. It is smaller than the rest of the characters, so it is not gatsukou, but gakkou. And when we spell this in Romaji, we double up the consonant that comes after tsu, right? So it's gakkou with 2 Ks and not gakkou with 1 K. 2 Ks because we have the small tsu. So whatever consonant comes afterwards, which is K for ko, we double that up. Gakkou, gakkou, te. Now this is another symbol that only has 1 stroke. So these pieces right here are all written together. It is not written separately. Here's what that piece looks like. So we have te. That's the entire shape right there. We don't lift up our pen when we draw this right here. Here's how I would draw this. There's really only one way to do this. I don't really know of a handwriting version that looks much different. So however I'd show you right here is pretty much how you're going to see it everywhere when you write in Japanese. So first we go from left to right. If you notice, that's going to be a thing in Japanese. Every time you write any horizontal line, it's always left to right. It's never right to left. So we go from left to right and we come around just like that. Now this back side right here won't really necessarily line up with that loop, and this side right here probably should line up with that loop at the very bottom. So just make sure that it's not like this or like that. You know, you want these pieces to look kind of similar. So as long as you get like pretty close to that shape right there, you should be good to go. So just one more time, just so that you can see it, left to right and then back around just like that. That is the hiragana te. And lastly, we have the hiragana to. This one has 2 strokes, and I will show you what those strokes are now. So first we have a line coming down angled from the top left to the bottom right. And then next we have a little C shape that it connects to. So both of those pieces together look like that. Those are the 2 pieces that make up the hiragana to. This is another one where there's not a whole lot of ways to handwrite it, so it's all pretty much gonna look the same, but I'll show you how it looks and which direction you draw each piece. So for to, we go from left to right, just like that, at an angle. Then we come from the top right corner right here, we hit that piece like that. We make a little C shape at the end of it. So that is the hiragana to. I'll write it a couple more times, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. So we have a line, then we have a line that comes around and intersects with it, or gets really close to touching with it. That is the hiragana for to. Do you remember from last lesson where I was talking about the ten marks, the little 2 quotation marks that you put in the top right of certain hiragana to change the sound? The T sounds all have one of those ten marks, and it turns all the T sounds into D sounds. Here's what they look like and here's what they sound like. So the symbols themselves look exactly like ta, chi, tsu, te, to, but you can see we've added these little accent pieces on the top right corner of each one of them, which changes the consonant T into a consonant D. So these are not pronounced ta, chi, tsu, te, to, but they are pronounced da, ji, zu, de, do. Now, there are 2 hiragana in here that we don't actually see very often in any words, and I can't think of any words off the top of my head that have them, although I know there are words that use them, and those 2 are the ji and the zu. So from what I know about these 2 hiragana symbols, ji and zu, the chi with ten marks and the tsu with ten marks, these used to be sounds that were used in Japanese, but in Japanese recent history, the past couple hundred years, they've not used these symbols anymore because these sounds don't exist in Japanese anymore. So these are actually pronounced the exact same way as sa, shi, su, se, so's shi and su when they have ten marks. So shi with ten marks is pronounced ji, and su with ten marks is pronounced zu. These are pronounced the exact same way, ji and zu, but you don't actually see these used in a whole lot of words. I know that for zu, I believe tsuzuku, which means to continue, tsuzuku uses the hiragana tsu with ten marks and not the hiragana su with ten marks to be zu. So tsuzuku means to to continue something. I can't think of any word that has G with chi 10 marks off the top of my head. So you do need to know how to pronounce these. You need to know that chi with 10 marks is G and tsu with 10 marks is zu, like in tsuzuku. But again, it's not something that you'll see very often, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But da, de, and do are very popular, very commonly used. So as long as we keep in mind that the T sounds turn into D sounds when we make a 10 mark with them, you'll be good to go. Ta, chi, tsu, te, to without 10 marks, and da, ji, zu, de, do with 10 marks. Let's move on to some vocabulary words that you can make with these symbols that we just learned today. Taxi. Taxi is a word that you normally spell in katakana because it's a borrowed word from English that means taxi. However, just because we know these symbols in hiragana, I'm going to teach it to you today. It does have a long line afterwards, which is a elongated sound that you see in katakana and not hiragana. But as we're learning Japanese, you will see these signs written in hiragana for people that don't know any katakana yet. So taxi, although we're not really supposed to spell it in hiragana, is the Japanese word for taxi. Kuchi. Kuchi means mouth. So you may have known this word already if you'd seen my TikTok video about kuchi sabishi, which is a phrase used when you are bored eating in Japanese. It means lonely mouth, and kuchi from that phrase means mouth in Japanese. Chisai. Chisai means small. Now this is chi-i-sai, not chisai, but chisai, a long e sound. Atsui means hot. It's specifically referring to temperature, so being hot outside. Atsui. Soto wa atsui. It is hot outside. Atsui. This is not asui, but atsui. Tsu sound, not su sound. For another small tsu sound, we have kekkon. So this is pronounced very similarly to kekko, which means I'm fine, but kekkon with an in at the end of that means marriage or marry. So kekkon shiki is wedding ceremony. Kekkon shiteimasu means to be married. Kekkon shimasu means to marry. So kekkon means marriage. For te, we have tenki. Tenki means weather in Japanese. So ii tenki means good weather. Warui tenki means bad weather. Tenki, weather. For to, we have totemo. Totemo means very. So we could say totemo atsui, which means very hot. Totemo samui, which means very cold. Haven't taught you mu yet, but hey, there's another word for you. Samui is cold, atsui is hot. Both refer to weather. Totemo atsui, very hot. Totemo samui, very cold. Now, te by itself actually means hand. So if you say watashi no te or boku no te, that means my hand. So te is hand. To by itself is actually a particle that means and. So I could say mizu to ocha, which means water and tea. Here are some vocabulary words with the D sounds from the T with 10 marks. Dozo. Dozo means please or go ahead. So if you're walking into a store and you open up a door for someone and they're waiting for you to go first, you could say dozo, which means please go ahead of me after you. Dozo.